I heard one of your YouTube videos and you discussed going into the second and third spheres, and I'm fascinated with that, and I wanted to know, what does it feel like when you move from one sphere to another? How do you know?
Well, how you know in the spirit world is very different to how you know on earth. Does that make sense? So if you were in the spirit world, how you would know is that you would be in a new location that's much brighter in its condition of love, much more loving surroundings. The people around you would be much more loving in their reflection. And so you would know that there's a new location. But also, the locations are separated by interstellar boundaries. So interstellar boundary is a large gap of light, of many hundreds of light years generally, between one boundary and the other. So before you make the transition, you can't make the jump of that interstellar boundary. You can't move yourself, if you like, into the new sphere. Once you change in your soul condition, you can now make the jump of that interstellar boundary. Does that make sense? So you now know that your condition must have improved. Right? So it's quite easy to tell in the spirit world as to how your condition has changed. On earth, it's much more difficult to tell. And the reason why is because your surroundings do not change. It's only the law of attraction that brings you different events that causes the change in your life on earth. So if we look at it from a spirit perspective, if I'm a spirit and I'm asking the question, how do I know that I've just made an improvement in my condition of love? Well, the way I know is that I might be consigned to this realm, so let's call that the first sphere, right? And over here, there is an interstellar gap of many hundreds of light years, right? That if I try to circumnavigate the gap using my will, I can't get across it. So that tells me that I've yet to make the transition from the first sphere to the second sphere. If I use my will and I can get across that gap, it means that I've now grown in love in my soul to enable myself to make that transition. Does that make sense? So it's quite simple for me, because in this first sphere condition, I had certain surroundings which were all, and in the first sphere, the surroundings vary from the hells right the way through to Summerland in the first sphere. And then the second sphere is like exponentially more incredible than the first sphere in terms of more loving, more beautiful. The surroundings are more pleasant to exist in. And because of that, once I've made the transition, my entire life has reflected back to me my changing condition. So that's if I'm a spirit. If I'm on earth now, how do I know I've made that transition? Because I've still got a physical body, and my physical body can't cover interstellar gaps, right? It's only my spirit body that could cover the interstellar gap. So, and unless I'm aware of my sleep state condition, which most people by the second sphere are not aware, there's no other way for me to know for certain that I've made this transition from a physical measuring perspective. What will change, however, is my attractions, what I attract. The more loving you become, the more your attractions change. Now, unfortunately on earth, the attractions change in two directions. When I'm in a more loving condition, I am now more confronting to the people that are in an unloving condition. So on earth, the earth is in a first sphere condition, and now when I'm in a more loving condition, I'm in a second sphere condition, I become more confronting to the people around me. But I'm not confronting from an angry perspective because I'm more loving. It's just that people are challenged more by what I say than by what I do. See, in the first sphere, most people are challenged by what you do because you're just unloving most of the time, right? So they get challenged by what you do. But when you progress to the second dimension, or the second sphere, in terms of condition of love, the love comes out of you more. So that changes what you attract. Now, anybody who's attracted to love will find you a more pleasant person to be with. But anybody who doesn't like love, or finds love difficult to accept, or finds truth difficult to accept in particular, they will feel more confronted by your presence. So they'll like you still, right? But they feel more confronted by being with you. But not only that, what happens is your surroundings start to change. The plants around you and the animals around you and all these other things around you can feel your growth in love. So they all change in the way they treat you. Right? So that all changes. And then in addition to that, what you attract from the universe changes. So in other words, the amount of funds you attract into your life, the experiences you attract into your life become more enjoyable. And most importantly, you feel more love for everyone. And you feel more desire to be loving to others. Does that make sense? That's all the thing. They're all the same. And you feel, when you make this first to second sphere transition, you feel more desire to be more truthful. You're no longer driven by fear as much. So fear, instead of fear dictating your life, fear governs your life a lot less when you make that transition. Does that make sense? So the biggest measurable differences are internal. But because you're not living in a new location, as if you would be in your spirit world, you would be living in a new location, it's harder to determine it if you can't feel. So this is why you need to, one of the reasons why you need to feel. The more you feel, the more you know what's going on, and therefore the more you'll feel your condition change. So you won't be measuring it by what people give you, you'll be measuring it by what you feel for other people. Now, for many of us, we're not honest about what we feel about other people because we often feel challenged, angry, resentful. We often feel these emotions, right? Well, once you make growth in love, you feel less of those emotions. So you feel more love for people, not less. You feel more connected with people, not less connected. You feel more like you understand why people do what they do, not less understanding. These are all the transitions that happen internally. Yep. Yeah. Does that help? Once the transitions are internal, you will know that you've changed. Until then, you'll have to ask somebody else whether you've changed, probably. Right? And the key with all of your life, I feel, is this. Look back over the years. So let's say the gap between change is going to have years associated with it, right? So look back over the years and ask yourself some basic questions. Am I more loving now than I was a year ago? Has my relationship with my partner, if I've got one, changed in that time and become more loving? Has my relationship with myself become more loving? Is the way that I feel about other people more loving than I used to feel? Or do I just get as angry as I always got before? Am I still doing the same things? Or am I still attracting the same events as I was attracting a year ago? Has my life substantially changed in a positive direction over that time? Is the question I need to ask myself. Because if your life has substantially changed, then it usually indicates that you've received some love that's transformed your soul over that period. But if your life is substantially the same life as you had a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, if it's substantially the same, then I suggest that very little of God's love has been received. And what do we have to do then? If we want to receive it, we might need to work out what we're doing to block it. What we're doing to shut down the process of receiving God's love. Because remember, it's God's love that will change your soul. So it's only God's love that will help you get from that dimension to that dimension from a soul condition change. And what you attract will tell you whether that change has been made. Right? So like before I met Mary, I lived for 5 years alone. And I was making change here and making change there and making change here, and different things in my life were changing, but I still didn't meet Mary. And so I had to look at... Mind you, I had lots of offers of relationships in that time, right, which I refused because I knew that they all weren't my girl. Now, if I had engaged those offers of relationships, I'd probably still not have met Mary. Because by not engaging those relationships, I worked through different emotions. And my soul, I received more of God's love, and my soul condition changed and my attractions changed. So initially I attracted very angry, bitter women who used to always try to control me and all those kind of things. And eventually I started attracting women who were much softer than that, who were less demanding and controlling. And then as I dealt with more of my own grief, eventually I got to the point where my soul drew Mary into my life. Right? So if you've been alone for 5 years and your soulmate's still not near your life, and you know that, and you still haven't got a relationship happening, and you've been trying to grow for 5 years, then my suggestion is there's got to be something blocking the flow of God's love that's causing you to be shut down in that regard. Because what you attract during this period of time will demonstrate to you the change in your condition. This is where I feel a lot of people are not honest with themselves, right? And to be frank, a lot of people in religions worldwide are not honest with themselves. Because the reality is you look back over 30 years of their life and they are usually just the same as they were 30 years ago. The same attitudes, the same belief systems, the same... Like, this is an indication. If you're the same as you were 30 years ago or 20 years ago, aside from the wrinkles changing, my suggestion is you're not growing in reception of God's love. Because if you're growing in the reception of God's love, there will always be change in your life. Change will be one of the constants, in fact, in your life. And the people who embrace the reception of God's love more generally are those who are willing to allow that change to occur. So most of us are terrified of change. If you're terrified of change, you might as well get off the divine love path and go and find another path that lets you be the same person for the next 100 years. Right? Because God wants you to continuously grow. Like, to me that's pretty obvious. Like, God creates a child, mum gives birth, and the child doesn't stay a baby for the rest of its life. It grows. And to me that indicates that God wants us to continually grow, continually change. Right? And we have the potential to continually grow and change. But we stop. On earth we stop growing physically, but we also stop growing emotionally and spiritually. We stop growing in our condition of love. We accept the status quo of the people around us. We accept where everyone else is around us and we go, well, that's the average person and that's what I am, the average person or whatever. But if we're really progressing towards God, we're not going to be satisfied with that. We will want to continuously grow. So be honest with yourselves and go, okay, what was I like 5 years ago? Before I heard about divine truth and before I heard about receiving God's love, and what am I like right now, today? Has that changed? Has my life changed over that period of time? Have I significantly changed? Has my attractions changed? Have I drawn different people into my life over that period of time? Are the people in my life more loving over that period of time? Or are they less loving? What has changed in my life? Do I feel different now? Am I more aware now? Do I understand do I understand myself better than I did then? Because all of those things are the result of receiving God's love. There will be significant changes. And in fact, if you receive God's love, there will be significant changes in months, not years, generally. And there can be significant changes in days. It's just how much we can cope with the change, personally. Psychologically, how much we can cope with it. And for most of us, we can't cope with much at all. So we shut down the process of receiving God's love, and so we don't change much. Right? And we will always, if we receive more love, we'll always be growing in love, in the way that we reflect love to other people, the way we act internally, our ethical relationships with the universe around us. So ethical relationships with men, with women, with animals, with children, with any living thing, in fact. The way that we view life will change significantly as we receive God's love. So that's how we measure whether it's working or not. If it's not change, if there's no change, then it means we have not grown, and it means that whatever things we think we've done, we obviously haven't done. Right? For change to actually occur, the soul has to change. And God's love entering the soul is what changes the soul. So more love needs to enter your soul in order for you to change. So if there has been little change in 5 years, then it means you've received little love in 5 years. That's what it means. And the only reason why that would occur is either you don't have a sincere desire to receive that love, or you've got a whole heap of things blocking it, pushing it away, where you don't want it. So that might be issues of lack of humility, or a lack of desire for new truth, or using your will out of harmony with the love you've already received, or having no faith that you can grow. These are all parts of developing those things. But at the end of the day, if you analyse your life today and you analyse your life a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, if there is not significant change, then it means you have not received love from God. And then it's up to you to determine why that's the case. Does that make sense? Yeah. Does that help with your answer?